when I was an executive at CIA, when I was interviewing people for jobs, I would ask them, have you ever failed before? And they would say no, and they would not get the job. I want to hear how they've failed, what adversity they've gone through, and how they've grown from it.
Hey everyone, this is Mick Spears from the Leadership Project. We were recently greatly honoured to be joined by Marc Polymeropolous, the author of a book called Leadership in Crisis, Leadership Lessons Learned from the CIA. Marc is a 26-year veteran as a CIA agent, and he has learnt 9 key principles about leadership from his time there. And in today's video, we're just going to highlight a few of those. Please enjoy. Okay, so I want to dig deeper now into your 9 principles that are in the book.
Sure.
And you've already covered part of this by saying that you get people around you that you don't have to be the smartest person. You don't have to do everything. You bring people around you that all have a role to play, that all have their own strength, their own superpower, so to speak, and it's your collective that makes you effective. The first principle that you talk about is the glue guy. Yeah. What does the glue guy mean?
So this is my favorite principle, and I think it applies, as we talked about just at the beginning of the show. The glue guy is the notion. By the way, you have to say glue guy or glue gal, and I kick myself for not putting that in the book. But it's the idea of there are indispensable members of your team who are not going to be your rock stars. They're not going to be the most valuable player on a sports team. They're not going to be a case officer of the CIA. They're not going to be a door kicker for SEAL Team 6. But frankly, they are just as important in any operation / business unit, proposal, anything. And so as a leader, you have to do 2 things. You have to, first of all, understand and identify these people. And then number 2, celebrate their successes, because it's just as important, frankly, in a company. If there's a huge success in a company, what about the IT guy? What about the secretaries, the executive assistants? Everything, all the pieces that make kind of everything function, they have to be celebrated. And then the last point is you have to involve them in planning sessions.
Brilliant. Let's move to number 2. Adversity is a performance enhancing drug. Tell us about that.
Right. No, but so adversity is the PD to success is the notion, and I really believe this, is that elite teams are going to have to fail at first before they ultimately succeed. Or Michael Jordan. What happened Michael Jordan's sophomore year in high school, his second year in high school? He got cut from his high school basketball team, but that becomes his superpower. So my contention is, adversity becomes your superpower to succeed in crisis situations. When I was an executive at CIA, when I was interviewing people for jobs, I would ask them, have you ever failed before? And they would say no, and they would not get the job. I want to hear how they've failed, what adversity they've gone through, and how they've grown from it. I tell some stories in the book which are really personal, and I'll summarize them quickly now. But it was a span of about 10 years. I was in Iraq, living up in the mountains in Kurdistan before the war, and we had recruited an Iraqi, an agent who was giving us what we call order of battle information on Saddam Hussein's military, which was really important for Pentagon planners. And ultimately, it was my job to handle him. He was spying for us. But I pushed him too hard, and tragically he was caught and he was tortured and he was executed. And I never forgot that, because that was on me. That was adversity that I faced. Clearly it was a terrible tragedy. Years later in Afghanistan, we had another high profile operation. We actually were looking for a Taliban member who was responsible for the deaths of 2 CIA officers. Same kind of pressure back from our headquarters to really find this individual. Not only had he been responsible for killing 2 of my colleagues, but he was still plotting attacks. But I had learned from that, and I was much more patient. I didn't push the agents we recruited. There was a lot of pressure on me, but I really remembered the previous situation, and ultimately we found this individual, and he was taken off the battlefield by the U.S. military. And I remember that night we were sitting around a fire pit in eastern Afghanistan, and we took a satellite phone and we called the widow of one of our officers who was killed, and we told her that we had avenged her husband's death. And I really sat there and I thought about kind of that 10-year journey I had been on, where I'd faced this adversity. It really still haunted me that someone I was responsible for had been killed. And then later on, we did something really good, helping to protect Americans, and of course, giving some closure to widow of one of our officers. So I really do think that idea of adversity is really powerful, but it almost goes to kind of one of the fundamentals that I always talk about is that, is to be humble, to realize bad things are going to happen. And so you don't want something bad to happen, but adversity is something that is part of life. And so you kind of have to embrace it and you learn from it. And I really think that high performance teams, if they go through that and they take those lessons, can be super successful when times are tough. And so it's a principle I really believe in.
Number 8 of our 9 principles, employ the dagger. First of all, it sounds very Shakespearean. And then secondly, what is it?
I'll switch it around. Remember the old, what was the movie Wall Street when they said greed is good? Do you remember that phrase?
Yeah.
My contention when I say employ the dagger is that competition is good. And we can't get scared of competition. And so why do I use the word the dagger? Well, the dagger was something, I served in the Middle East for most of my career. And so when we had an operational success, I would have gone out in the street to some street vendor and bought a little cheap wooden dagger that cost $10. And what I would do is I would hand these out to individual officers for their successes. There's no monetary value. There's nothing that's going to go in their performance review. But what I found with these teams is they would be crazy vying for this silly dagger because it was this status symbol that kind of developed in the team. And so it was the idea of fostering a healthy sense of competition. But when I talk to groups, I would say, okay, so, how is competition, looked at in your organization, and what little things can you do like that dagger that would kind of foster this? And again, this is simple, it's easy, but it's my son plays college baseball. He called me the other day. It's amazing we're talking about this. It was actually yesterday. He said, "Dad, what do you think we can do? I want to reward." He's the captain of the team. I want to reward people on the team. And I said, well, look, I remember I saw sports teams go out and buy a silly fedora, silly hat. And every time the player of the game is going to get that hat, and they got to put it on and wear it as they're walking off the field. I guarantee you, in 1 month, everyone is vying for that silly hat. And it becomes this kind of bonding mechanism too. And so I just love the idea of kind of fostering competition. Don't be scared of it. Promote it, and really everybody can kind of rise together.
Now, it all culminates. Number 9 of your 9 values culminates with finding clarity in the shadows. What does that mean?
If you use these principles when there is, when you're in that gray, you're going to be able to be a better leader and make better decisions. You're going to find that clarity. You're going to actually be the one who's going to say, I'm actually okay right now. That 9th principle really puts it together. It's the concept that you can make decisions under times of a lack of situational awareness if you just follow some of these fundamentals.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of just being happy in that gray area. And it's real. And when you get to that point, it's really interesting. Because it gives you so much more confidence. Now you have to follow the principles, but life doesn't seem so hard anymore. And I would just go back and think about 2 years of COVID and what businesses had to go through. There are real everyday, scenarios where you can kind of make that, make this really kind of resonate and hit home.
So what I'm taking away there, Marc, is that when you've built in these previous 8 principles, then as a leader and as a team, you then have the courage to be able to step into the shadows, to step into the unknown, and every business has their unknown territory.
Right.
And enable you to take risks where you otherwise might not have, and risks that have a potential reward attached to them. So
look, it turned out to be smart managed risk. I mean, that's exactly right. But it's the idea. It's that inner strength you have. It's not risk based on just taking a shot, a chance, with nothing behind it. It's managed risk because you've done these kind of foundational things to get you to a point where you're feeling comfortable. That's all it is. And so, and that to me, and when you get to that, it's that, you do have this kind of, epiphany, where I think you can be a lot more successful in life in whatever kind of business model, business sector you're in.